to clarify some things with respect to the operations associated with the execution of inmate, the inmate yesterday. I'm sorry. It's really, really important that information is accurate and clarified with the execution of inmate Grant, because as I've mentioned many, many times before, it is my intent to continue executions in Oklahoma utilizing a humane and efficient manner to do so. And so I'm going to go ahead and start with an opening statement, and then from there I'm going to actually walk through the events of yesterday, explaining some specific incidents or areas that have been questioned. On October 28, 2021, the Oklahoma Department of Corrections carried out the court-ordered execution of inmate John Marion Grant at 4:21 p.m. This execution was carried out in accordance with Oklahoma statutes and Oklahoma Department of Corrections policies and procedures without complication. I think it's important to provide a bit of history regarding that operation prior to actually the administering of the drugs. Yesterday, for most of the day, inmate Grant was agitated, so to speak, in that he was, of course, anticipating what could potentially occur, because at that point in time we were actually under a court-ordered stay, awaiting a decision from the United States Supreme Court. So as the day progressed, inmate Grant continued to be extremely agitated to the point of becoming verbally abusive, using expletives throughout the day as staff attempted to work with him through providing meals, through the restraint process, and then through the process of being escorted into the actual chamber. Once he was in the chamber, he continued to be, his behavior continued to escalate to the point of screaming and yelling obscenities toward DOC staff, and also at certain points in the presence of witnesses that were in the witness areas. He was at the point of, or at 4:09 p.m., the Oklahoma Department of Corrections started administering the first drug of the drug protocol. Within a few seconds of administering that drug, inmate Grant started the process of being sedated. A few seconds later, he let out a gasp of air, although he continued to breathe, and he started what I would refer to as a light snoring. At 4:10 p.m., inmate Grant started, there's different explanations for this, or different opinions as to what occurred next. But at 4:10 p.m., inmate Grant, in my opinion, started dry heaving prior to actually regurgitating while on the table. There are some that have referred to that as convulsing. As he started that process, I conferred with the physician that we had on site monitoring the process, and he advised me that regurgitation is not a completely uncommon instance or occurrence with someone that's undergoing sedation. At that point in time, the physician advised me that inmate Grant was sedated based off of his behavior, based off of the observation of the monitoring equipment that we have in the operations room. Even though he was sedated, he regurgitated for approximately for several seconds. And I advised the physician that I wanted him to go in the room and actually tilt the inmate's head and also wipe the inmate's face, just simply from a humane perspective and also from a dignity perspective, to get the vomit off of his face as we continued with the drug protocol. At no point in time during that regurgitation incident was the protocol process stopped or inhibited. So we continued through that, and that was within the application of the first set of drugs. When this first set of drugs was completed, there was a 5-minute period where we actually assessed the inmate for consciousness, and that was again after the regurgitation incident. The physician went in, verified through a sternum rub that the inmate was in fact unconscious, and the drug protocol proceeded from there. there were no instances of any unusual behavior throughout the drug protocol other than the instance of the regurgitation. At 4:21 p.m., the doctor pronounced the inmate deceased and the execution was concluded. From the start of pushing the drugs to the conclusion of pushing the drugs was 12 minutes. So it took 12 minutes to complete the execution process. In statements that the department has issued last night and today, one of the things that we mentioned is that the protocol was completed without complication. And the basis for that is at no point through the protocol or administering the protocol were there ever any delays or any complications that prevented the protocol from being completed. The protocol was completed in accordance with, again, with state statute and with department policy. And at no point, other than the regurgitation, did inmate Grant express any discomfort. He did not express that he was in pain. He simply continued to shout expletives towards staff. At one point, looked toward his arm, trying to determine which side the drugs were being passed through, flinched his arm, and then laid his head back down, excuse me, and was what appeared to be have gone to sleep. So that's really the process as it occurred that day. There's not anything about what I just said that is overstated or understated. That's exactly the occurrence. And I actually had a direct view or vision of the process, and that's basically what happened. One of the questions that has been asked is when did inmate Grant receive his last meal yesterday? And he received his last meal at breakfast, which is at 7:10 a.m. It was a breakfast tray that included biscuits, gravy, eggs, oatmeal, and milk. He only ate the eggs off of that tray. He did not eat a lunch meal, but he did have snacks that were in his cell throughout the day. That particular day, yes. So in short, that's basically the events that transpired. Again, there's a lot of information that I believe is the basis for the information is correct, but the actual some of the information is either embellished or is not exactly on point. At this point, I will conclude my statement and open it up for questions.
This is Justin Wolf. So I am going to now open up the chat to receive questions. So if attendees have any questions they'd like to submit, please type those into the chat now, and we will address those to the extent that we can and address those as they come in. And I am informed by our IT professionals that there is a short delay between when a question is submitted and when it comes to us. So please bear witness or bear with us as we go through that process and deal with that IT issues. Barbara Hoberock from the Tulsa World has asked us if we're planning on any changes.
That is a very good question, Barbara. And at this point, no, we are not planning on any new changes.
There's a question from an anonymous source. Will there be an official review of or investigation into Grant's execution?
One of the things that is a part of our process is a quality assurance review of the complete process from start to finish, and that quality review process is currently underway.
There's another question from an anonymous source asking for clarification whether or not inmate Grant ate the last meal that was listed on the fact sheet.
Inmate Grant did in fact eat the last meal that was listed on the fact sheet on 5:13 p.m. on October 27th, which was the Wednesday prior to the execution date.
We have an anonymous question asking if the physician gave a reason for the regurgitation.
I did confer with the physician, and the physician advised that it is not uncommon for regurgitation to occur when someone is undergoing the process of sedation.
Another attendee has asked the question, what does this mean for Julius Jones and future executions? Will the same drugs still be used?
The 3-drug protocol that was utilized yesterday for inmate Grant is the same drug protocol that the department currently has in place for all inmates scheduled for execution. So the answer to the question is yes, that same protocol will be utilized for Julius Jones.
Please bear with me. I want to remind everybody that there are some questions that are being submitted that are asking for specific medical opinions. And so we are going to address the questions that we can address right here. For any questions that we can't get to within the time that we have available, please follow up with me afterwards and we will address those as we can. And also, I'm seeing some questions that are coming through multiple times, and please bear with us. There is a delay on the information technology side, so we're trying to process those. But I'm seeing some questions that I've already addressed pop up repeatedly in the chat. So again, please bear with us as we try and address these questions as they were coming in. We have a question from K4 News. Do you believe there is any inhumanity to Grant vomiting due to midazolam? It appears quite graphic and disturbing.
I think any incident with involving a medical procedure or a reaction to a medical procedure is very, very unfortunate. And I will agree. Inmate Grant's regurgitation was not pleasant to watch, but I do not believe that it was inhumane, because at the point in time that he was regurgitating, according to the physician that was monitoring the process, inmate Grant was in fact sedated.
We have a question. What information specifically was embellished in reference to your statements earlier?
There've been a variety of statements that have been made from a variety of different sources, but there were some sources indicating that the inmate regurgitated completely or throughout the whole process. That is not true. The inmate started regurgitating at 4:10, and the regurgitation lasted a short period of time, and the execution proceeded. There have been comments regarding the number of times the inmate convulsed or dry heaved on the table. By my estimation, that the number of times is less than 10. There's some that have indicated it was 24. From my vantage point, I didn't see that, but I'm not refuting what was said. I'm just saying what I observed directly myself.
We have a question from an anonymous source. Was inmate Grant housed separately from his typical H unit placement prior to yesterday?
Yes, he was.
We have another question. What has changed since 2015 to ensure the proper drugs are administered? From Krmg.
That's a very good question. It's really a more accountable chain of custody that is validated and verified at multiple steps throughout the process leading up to the execution date. And then on the day of the execution, it's validated and verified again through at least a 2 or 3 step process.
We have a question from KFOR News. Did Grant really buck himself out of the gurney? What can you tell us about that?
Again, I had a direct line of sight with inmate Grant during the process. And although inmate Grant did, again, I'm going to refer to it as dry heave, because just during the dry heaving process, it was just seconds after he stopped that the regurgitation started. But there were periods of time during his dry heaving that his upper body or his head lifted slightly off of the table, but his whole body did not rise off the table, nor did his legs or arms.
All right, and with that, that's all the time we have for questions today. I